Welcome to Day 39 on the Trail. We have 5 readings for today from Luke 22 verses 1 through 38, Exodus 10:21 through 11:10, Job 13 verses 1 through 28, the 49th Psalm, and Sirach chapter 43 verses 1 through 33. In Exodus today, we come to the 9th plague, the plague of darkness. Once again, Moses initiates the plague with just his hand. And this is a marker of the third triad of the plagues. The darkness of this plague lasts 3 days. Now 3, like the number 7, is another significant number in the Bible. The most obvious use of the number 3 is the number of days that Jesus was placed in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. But there are hundreds of other occurrences of the number 3 in the Bible. For example, Jonah spent 3 days in the belly of a great fish. Other times, the occurrence of the number 3 is not very obvious, but still significant. For example, if you recall our exploration of the story of creation in Genesis chapter 1, God had 2 specific agendas when designing the universe. During the first 3 days, God limits chaos and sets boundaries. Then over the second set of 3 days, He gave the elements of creation productive work to do. And what did God do on the 7th day? He rested. So here in Genesis 1, we see the use of the number 3 and the number 7. Now, as we approach the 10th plague and the death of the firstborn of Egypt, I'm reminded of something very important. We do not live in isolation. We are deeply impacted by the sins and bad decisions of those around us. And unfortunately, they are impacted by our bad decisions. The firstborn of Egypt were devastatingly impacted by the stubbornness of Pharaoh. Likewise, we too must be ever aware of the impact that our decisions have on those around us. As we approach the 10th plague in Exodus, we also find the institution of the first Passover. This is a community-defining event which is deeply connected to the Lord's Supper as found in Luke 22. However, Luke is not the first record of the events of Jesus' last meal with his disciples. Instead, in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, which was probably written in the 50s or 60s, some 20 or 30 years before Luke's gospel, Paul provides us with the earliest record of the church's practice of the Lord's Supper. There he writes in 1 Corinthians 11, "For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way, he took the cup also after supper, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.'" There are 3 core actions which comprise the Lord's Supper. First, we do. Since symbols participate in reality, we actually eat the bread and drink from the cup. We literally participate in this meal. Second, we proclaim. We proclaim the sacrifice and death of Jesus, and also his resurrection and the second coming. And third, we remember. We remember both the events of that night, but also we remember Jesus himself, who is with us today, and each time we celebrate this meal with him. As I mentioned earlier, this Christian meal, sometimes called the Lord's Supper, or communion, or the celebration of the Eucharist, is profoundly connected to the night that Jesus celebrates Passover with his disciples for the final time. And if Passover is the setting for the Lord's Supper, what are the relevant symbols for those of us who participate in this meal today? First, this meal is a covenant that Jesus offers to us. a covenant that redeems us from our slavery to sin and our slavery to our own self-centeredness. Second, this is also the establishment of a new community of God's people. As the Hebrew people in Egypt were passed over from death, rescued from slavery, and called to be a witness to God's acts in the world, we, as we share this meal together, are called to proclaim Jesus' death, resurrection, and eventual return. And finally, we must never forget that this is also a meal that Jesus shared with his disciples, and a meal that he shares with us. In her book entitled For the Time Being, Annie Dillard describes in vivid detail a remarkable archaeological dig in central China. With dramatic imagery, she describes the long trenches dug into the soil to reveal thousands of clay soldiers trapped in the earth, an entire army sculpted in clay, men, horses, and their weapons, buried to accompany an emperor into the afterlife. Dillard captures the faces of these clay soldiers, fighting as if to free themselves from the clay. She writes, "The sight of the clean clay soldier, upright in a museum case, is unremarkable. But this is all that future generations will see. No one will display men crushed beyond repair. No one will display them crawling from the walls of the trenches." The Lord's Supper, this meal shared among followers of Jesus, has been prepared in the midst of the trenches of our world, in the heart of daily life. The creator of the universe did not stare at his creation through a glass case in a museum. Instead, he became part of that creation. The one who made the earth became as one formed of the earth. He came to show us, in person, that he will never forget our struggle. This table that Jesus has invited us to is not a table built on authority, but humility. Not force, but faith. Not self-centeredness, but self-sacrifice. May this table, this meal that we celebrate together, never become a museum piece hidden behind stained glass. Let us never forget the struggle of this table, a table that brought God himself into the trenches to free us. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.